Now, I need you to come with me to 1 Kings chapter 5. Because I want to share with you how Solomon's temple was being built and the spiritual application to the spiritual temple that God's building right now with saints, with believers. So 1 Kings chapter 5. And I'm going to start in verse 15. And this is Solomon giving the instructions through the Lord on how the temple was to be built. So 1 Kings chapter 5, verse 15. Solomon had 70,000 carriers. So the carriers it was the group, the army of people that once the stone was quarried and prepared, the quarries were far away from Jerusalem. Then the carriers would carry the stones to Jerusalem to put into the temple. So you had this 70,000 to carry these precious stones to the temple site. Then we read, okay, so let's see, 70,000 carriers, and then there were 80,000 stone cutters in the hills. So they're the ones that are cutting out the stones out of the ground, as well as 3,300 foremen who supervised the project and directed the workers. At the king's command, they removed from the quarry large blocks of high-grade stone to provide a foundation of, and you'll notice it says dressed stone for the temple. Well, most of the temple was actually built out of stones. And there's stone columns, and there's stone archways, and there's elaborately carved stones. And so I want you to look at how the stones were dressed. What does it mean to dress a stone? So look at 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 7. In building the temple, only blocks dressed at the quarry were used. So only blocks dressed at the quarry were used. And then it was delivered. It was carried to the temple site. And you'll notice it says, and no hammer, chisel, or any other iron tool was heard at the temple site while it was being built. So to dress a stone is to totally prepare it. You know, they would quarry it out and it'd be rough. So they would, rough cut stone. It'd have bulges on it and imperfections. And so then the quarry people, to dress it means like to perfect it, to get it to the right size. You know, they would have the dimensions and the right size and the right grooves and carvings and polishing it. And that's where they would use chisels. Last week, Pastor Ernie, but by the way, I know a lot of you said you were away. You missed church, Pastor Joe, the last 2 weeks. Oh, no, we weren't. We were online. We were right with you. We didn't skip church at all. So, 2 great sermons. Last week, Pastor Ernie was talking about pain. And I'm like, see, the problem is that's when God's using his spiritual chisel and hammer to like, hey, we got some pride. You know, the hardest thing is to die to self. The hardest thing is to take up your cross and follow Jesus. And so like Joe Toomey, like I got some pride and the Lord has to use hammer and chisel. We call this sanctification, becoming Christ-like. And you know, the blocks are all different. This set, there's like hundreds of different size blocks. But some of the blocks are really small. It's crazy how small they are. And they're so small I can't really pick them out. So like here's a small block, and then there's some blocks that are bigger. There's some blocks that are like columns, and some are really fancy. Like here's an archway block that's been carved. So like, you know, they're all different. And that's the way I view the heavenly temple that's being built. There are some blocks that are very small. And that's because, like the thief on the cross, he just got saved just hours before he was taken to go to be built into the spiritual temple in heaven. So he didn't have a lot of time. So but he's significant. Every block is needed. Like in Solomon's temple, all the different sides, but they all work together to make this one temple. Even so there are some that, they're like this, but you need them. And then there are others that the Lord has been working with for years, dressing you. And you've been walking with the Lord 40 years, 50 years, and God has been like chiseling you to become a pillar. And I know I'm going to run out of time, but I was going to share with verses. There are Christians that are pillars in that spiritual temple, according to Revelation chapter 2 and 3. There are Christians, God says there's different Christians with different glory. So like if you look at the stars, some stars shine really bright. Those are the soul winners. Those are the ones that have incredible wisdom that share with others. So there's all different type of stones, and some stones are incredibly beautiful because you've allowed God to dress you for 40, 50 years on the earth before you're taken. Now, you notice there's two groups of people. There's the quarry people who dig the stone out of the quarry and dress the stone. That's the church. Our job is to share Jesus Christ and to go into the world and to quarry and share the gospel of Jesus Christ, that a dead stone, someone who's lost, gives their heart to Jesus and they become a living stone. The church is to quarry stones to go to the lost and to share the gospel. And then when someone gets saved, then we begin the process of dressing the stone. And that's where Sunday school teachers and elders and nursery workers and those down in the children's ministry and actually we're working on each other. We're hitting each other and sharpening and polishing and working and preparing, sanctification. And then at some point, you're done. And the angels are the carriers. And the angels, God has two groups. The church is quarrying it, dressing it, and then the angels are carrying that soul to the New Jerusalem, to Zion, and the angels place that soul into the heavenly temple. You'll notice that there are no tools used. When Solomon's temple was being built, all the dressing had to perfectly be done at the quarry. That's the earth, so to speak. But once the stone was sent out, no more tools. Like you can't go, I'm going to wait till I get to heaven, then God will keep working. No. You're done. Whatever you've allowed Jesus. We're all going to be Christ-like, but I told you we're going to be different sizes and all. But once you die, there's no more working on you. You are who you are in Jesus. At Solomon's temple, when the stones would come, I told you there was this awe. There was this quietness. There was to be no noise as the blocks would be perfectly laid in, that perfectly would fit. There was, in the same way, the angels, a soul is ready, and the angel takes that soul, and there's an awe and quietness in heaven as another soul comes into the temple.